The biker was known around town for his carefree attitude and reckless behavior. He loved the attention he got from zooming through the streets on his loud motorcycle, feeling like everyone had to stop and notice him. His rides weren't just about getting from one place to another. They were about making an impression. To him, the world was his stage, and he was the star. His leather jacket, boots, and tough guy persona were part of the performance. He often revved his engine to show off, sometimes speeding by pedestrians or cutting off cars just for the thrill of it. But there was one thing he enjoyed even more than his speed: messing with things for fun. One day, as he cruised through the park, he noticed a group of dogs playing on the grassy field. They were harmless, just enjoying the day as dogs do. But to the biker, they looked like easy targets for his twisted sense of amusement. He slowed his bike down and rolled it towards them, his foot barely touching the ground as he approached. He grinned, thinking of how funny it would be to mess with the dogs and see their reaction. There were a few people nearby, walking their own dogs or sitting on benches, but the biker felt like they were too far away to interfere. It was just him and the dogs. The biker kicked the first dog that came close. It was a small, scruffy terrier, wagging its tail and looking curious. The dog yelped as the biker's boot made contact, sending it scurrying away in confusion and fear. The biker laughed, pleased with himself. He kicked another dog, this one a larger, more timid retriever. It was clear that the dogs didn't understand why they were being treated this way, and they scattered, terrified by the sudden, unprovoked attack. The biker felt a rush of power, thinking it was all in good fun. After all, they were just dogs, right? They'd get over it. It didn't matter to him how they felt. The people nearby began to murmur, some even shouting at him to stop, but the biker ignored them. He was used to people getting upset by his actions. They didn't matter. The biker's fun was the only thing that mattered, and as long as he could get away with it, he would. He wasn't afraid of any consequences. What bothered him, though, was that he wasn't really scared of anything. He was untouchable, or at least, that's how he saw himself. He looked around the park, watching the frightened dogs, and felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. What he didn't know, as he continued his display of power, was that he was being watched. Unbeknownst to him, the dogs he was tormenting weren't just pets of random people. They were the beloved companions of someone very well known. Someone who wouldn't stand by and let this kind of behavior slide. But the biker had no idea who it was. To him, the dogs were just objects to play with, and whoever owned them didn't matter. That was about to change, though. In the midst of his little game, he didn't notice the man walking toward him from the other side of the park. He didn't know that this man, who was now just a figure in the distance, had a bond with these dogs stronger than he could ever understand. Jason Statham walked through the park, enjoying the quiet after his intense workout at the nearby gym. His mind was clear, and he felt good, as he always did after pushing his body to the limit. The air was fresh, and the sun was just starting to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows on the ground. As he moved through the park, his thoughts were on the upcoming movie he was working on, the upcoming travel plans, and, of course, his beloved dogs. They were waiting for him back at home, and he couldn't wait to spend time with them. His dogs were not just pets to him. They were his companions, his family. Jason had adopted them years ago, from a shelter, each one with its own unique story. They had been through thick and thin together, and he was incredibly protective of them. His dogs weren't just animals to him. They were like his children, and nothing in the world could replace the joy and loyalty they gave him every day. As Jason neared the grassy area where he often played with his dogs, he noticed something unusual. His dogs were acting a bit strange. They were standing off to one side, looking anxious and uneasy. His heart skipped a beat as he quickened his pace. Something was off. He scanned the area, his eyes moving over the dogs, trying to understand why they were behaving this way. That's when he saw him, the biker. At first, Jason wasn't sure what was going on. He saw the biker riding slowly through the park, But his attention immediately shifted when he noticed the biker's actions. The man seemed to be bothering his dogs. Jason's protective instincts kicked in. He had always been a calm, composed man, but anyone who hurt or threatened his dogs would soon see a side of him that wasn't so easygoing. Jason watched for a moment as the biker kicked one of his dogs, a small terrier that had been wagging its tail just moments before. The dog yelped and scrambled away, frightened. A rush of anger surged through Jason's chest. He knew he couldn't stand by and let this happen. He moved closer, trying to stay composed, but feeling his blood pressure rise with every second the biker continued his cruel actions. Jason's mind raced. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm, knowing that losing his temper wasn't going to solve anything. He couldn't let the biker get away with this. Jason had lived a life full of action, both in movies and in real life, but he was a man who believed in doing the right thing. This was one of those moments where he had no choice but to step in and protect those who couldn't protect themselves. As Jason made his way across the park, his dogs, sensing his presence, began to settle down, though they were still nervous. They trusted him, and Jason promised himself that he would never let anyone hurt them again. He reached the biker just as he was about to kick another dog. Jason stood tall, his eyes cold and serious as he approached. The biker, still unaware of who Jason was, didn't notice him at first, but that would soon change. Jason's voice was calm but firm as he spoke to the biker, his words carrying weight. "Hey," he said, catching the biker's attention. "You need to stop that. Right now." The biker turned to face him, a smirk playing on his lips. He looked Jason up and down, sizing him up. Little did he know, he was about to come face to face with someone who wouldn't take kindly to the way he had treated those dogs. The biker finally noticed the man standing before him. He looked at Jason up and down, sizing him up with a cocky smirk. The biker was used to intimidating people. He was the tough guy on the motorcycle, the one who didn't let anyone tell him what to do. He wasn't about to let some stranger, no matter how serious he looked, tell him how to behave. Jason stood tall, his posture calm but undeniably strong. There was no mistaking the authority in his voice when he spoke. "You need to stop hurting those dogs," he said, his eyes locked onto the biker with a steady intensity. The biker, trying to keep his cool, scoffed and leaned back slightly, a playful grin still on his face. "Is that so?" The biker replied, clearly not intimidated by Jason's presence. "And what are you going to do about it?" Jason didn't flinch. He wasn't the kind of person to start a fight, but he also wasn't about to back down when it came to defending what was right. "I'm going to make sure you stop. Right now," he said. His tone was firm, but it wasn't raised in anger. He wasn't trying to provoke a fight. He just wanted the biker to understand that there were consequences to his actions. The biker laughed, trying to brush off Jason's words. "What, you think you can tell me what to do? You're just some guy, man." He revved his motorcycle engine, as if to emphasize his point, trying to regain control of the situation. Jason's eyes didn't leave the biker, and he stepped closer, his presence unwavering. "It's not about me," Jason said, his voice low but clear. "It's about the dogs. They're not here for you to kick around. They don't deserve that. They're just trying to enjoy their day." The biker hesitated, taken aback by Jason's calm but strong demeanor. He'd expected to scare the man off with his tough talk, but Jason wasn't moving. He wasn't backing down, and for the first time, the biker's confidence faltered just a bit. He could sense that Jason wasn't someone to mess with, and something in his gut told him that this was a mistake he didn't want to make. Still, the biker tried to save face. He turned to the dogs, giving them an exaggerated look of annoyance. "They're just dogs, man," he said, trying to act like it was no big deal. "It's not like they're real people. They'll be fine." Jason's patience was running thin. He could feel his anger rising, but he knew he had to stay calm. He wasn't going to let this escalate into something ugly. Instead, he took another deep breath and addressed the biker directly. I don't care what you think of them. They're living creatures, and they deserve respect. So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk away from them. And you're going to do it now." The biker looked at Jason with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. It was clear that he wasn't used to being spoken to like this. In his world, he was the one who called the shots, the one who set the rules. But something about Jason's presence made him hesitate. For a moment, the two of them stood there, locked in a quiet standoff. The biker, still trying to maintain his tough guy act, realized he wasn't getting the reaction he wanted from Jason. The crowd around them had started to notice, and Jason's quiet strength was having an effect. It was clear that the biker's bravado wasn't enough to save him from the situation he had created. The power had shifted, and now Jason was the one in control. The biker stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing as he tried to process what was happening. He had always been the one in charge. In every situation, he made the rules, and people either followed them or stayed out of his way. But now, standing face to face with Jason Statham, it felt like he was the one being judged, the one who was out of place. For the first time in a long while, the biker began to feel the weight of his actions. Jason didn't move a muscle. He stood his ground, his gaze unwavering. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he wasn't going to let the biker get away with what he had done. Jason wasn't just defending his dogs. He was standing up for what was right, for the simple act of treating living beings with kindness and respect. He had seen so much of the world, both on screen and off, and had learned that there were battles worth fighting. This was one of them. The biker took a step back, unsure of how to respond. His defiance wavered, and for a brief moment, he questioned whether he had crossed a line he shouldn't have. He wasn't used to feeling this way, especially not in front of someone like Jason Statham. The man's presence alone seemed to challenge everything he thought he knew about strength. It wasn't about physical power. It was about standing up for others, about showing restraint and dignity. And that made the biker feel small. But still, he wasn't ready to fully back down. He tried to salvage his pride, to regain control of the situation. "Look, I didn't mean anything by it," he said, his voice less confident now. "I was just having some fun. No need to get so worked up about it." Jason's face remained calm, but his voice carried a firmness that left no room for misunderstanding. "Fun? You think it's fun to hurt animals? To make them scared for no reason? That's not fun. It's cruel." He took a step closer, his voice softening but still intense. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone, least of all at the expense of something innocent. Those dogs aren't here for your amusement." The biker shifted on his feet, his previous cocky attitude slipping away. He looked at the dogs, still cowering a little in the distance, and for the first time, he felt a pang of guilt. He hadn't really thought about how his actions affected them. They weren't just dogs to be kicked or shoved. They were living creatures, just like him, with feelings and fears. And now, standing in front of Jason, the biker started to realize that what he had done was wrong. Jason didn't need to say much more. He could see the change in the biker's expression, the realization that he had crossed a line. There was no point in making him feel worse. Jason had made his point, and that was enough. He wasn't looking to humiliate the biker or make him feel like a villain. Instead, Jason wanted him to understand, to change his behavior, and maybe even walk away with a lesson about kindness. The biker took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping as the weight of his actions settled in. "You're right," he muttered, his voice quieter now. "I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry." He didn't know if the apology would be enough, but it was all he could offer at that moment. Jason nodded, not expecting anything more. "Just make sure it doesn't happen again," he said, his tone still calm but firm. "And remember that actions have consequences. People and animals deserve to be treated with respect." The biker, now visibly humbled, gave a small nod of his own. He didn't say much else, but the look in his eyes was different. He wasn't the same person who had been laughing just moments before. The shift was subtle, but it was there. He turned away from Jason and the dogs, walking slowly toward his motorcycle. The park was still, the tension easing as the biker mounted his bike. He revved the engine once but didn't speed off like he usually would. Instead, he rode away at a much slower pace, a quiet reflection in his actions. Jason watched him go, feeling a sense of relief. His dogs, sensing that the danger had passed, began to approach cautiously. Jason bent down to reassure them, gently stroking their fur as they wagged their tails, happy to be safe again. As he stood up, he glanced back at the road where the biker had disappeared. Maybe, just maybe, that was the last time the biker would act out in such a way. Jason hoped so. As the biker slowly rode away, Jason stood in the park, watching him disappear into the distance. The tension in the air started to fade, but Jason couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of uncertainty. The biker had apologized, but Jason knew it wasn't enough to just say sorry. He wondered if the man would really learn from this experience, or if it was just a momentary lapse in judgment. Jason didn't expect immediate change, but he hoped that what had just happened might stick with the biker and inspire him to treat animals and people differently in the future. Jason's dogs, now more relaxed, came up to him, wagging their tails. He knelt down to greet them, giving each one a gentle pat on the head. They looked up at him with trust and affection, their earlier fear forgotten now that they were back in their owner's care. Jason couldn't help but smile at the sight of them. They were more than just pets to him. They were his companions, always by his side, offering loyalty and comfort in ways that only dogs could. As he stood up, he noticed a few people nearby, some of whom had witnessed the confrontation with the biker. They seemed to have been quietly observing from a distance, and Jason could tell they were still processing what had just happened. One of them, a woman with a small dog in tow, approached him cautiously. "Thank you for stepping in," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "It's not every day you see someone stand up for animals like that." Jason nodded, his expression still serious but grateful for the words. "It's the least I could do," he replied. "No one should treat animals like that." The woman gave him a knowing look. "It's not always easy, though. Some people don't understand the importance of kindness to animals. But you did the right thing." Jason smiled at her. He was used to receiving praise for his work in movies, but this felt different. This was real. This was about doing what was right, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. And it was moments like this that reminded him how much of an impact small actions could have. As the conversation with the woman continued, Jason felt a tap on his shoulder. Turning around, he saw the biker, his motorcycle parked a little ways off, still visible, but no longer in motion. The biker had returned. Jason raised an eyebrow, unsure of what to expect. Was he back to apologize again, or was there something more he wanted to say? The biker looked uncertain, almost hesitant. He stood there for a moment before speaking up. "Hey, I wanted to, really apologize for what I did earlier. It wasn't right. I didn't think about it at the time, but I get it now." Jason regarded him carefully, not letting his guard down completely, but giving the man a chance. "I appreciate that," he said, his voice steady. "It's not about saying sorry. It's about showing that you understand why what you did was wrong and making sure it doesn't happen again." The biker nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. "I get it now," he repeated. "I've always thought I was just having fun, but seeing it from your point of view, I understand how wrong I was. I'm sorry I hurt your dogs. I really am." Jason studied the biker for a moment, trying to gauge the sincerity of the apology. Something in the biker's tone told him this wasn't just a surface-level attempt to make amends. There was a real shift in the way he carried himself now, a recognition of his own behavior. Jason could see that this moment had impacted him more than he expected. "Thank you for coming back," Jason said, his voice softer this time. "I can't tell you how much it means to me that you came here to apologize. That shows you're willing to learn and change. Just remember, kindness goes a long way. Not just with animals, but with people too. The biker looked down, almost as if he was processing Jason's words, and then nodded. I will. I promise. I'll be more careful in the future. Jason smiled, giving him a nod of approval. I believe you. Just remember, every small action counts. You've got a chance to do better from here on out. With that, the biker turned to leave once more, this time with a more thoughtful stride. Jason watched him go, feeling the sense of satisfaction, knowing that the situation had ended on a positive note. The biker had come back to make things right, and for the first time, Jason felt like maybe, just maybe, the man was truly going to change. As Jason watched the biker ride off again, he turned back to his dogs, who were happily wagging their tails, clearly content and safe. He gave them another pat, grateful that they were okay. The day's events had been unexpected, but it had reminded him of the power of standing up for what's right and the potential for growth in people when they are willing to recognize their mistakes. Jason watched the biker ride off, his mind still replaying the encounter. He wasn't sure what would happen next for the biker, but for some reason, he felt hopeful. Sometimes, people needed a wake-up call to realize the impact of their actions, and today, it seemed like the biker had gotten that. Jason understood that change didn't happen overnight, but he believed that this moment might have planted a seed, a moment where the biker truly understood the value of compassion. As he walked back to his dogs, Jason felt a sense of peace. He knew they were safe, and that was all that mattered. They wagged their tails, their joyful faces bright as they jumped around him, ready for their walk. The park was quiet now, the sun setting in the distance and casting a warm glow over everything. Jason felt at home here, surrounded by nature and the animals he loved. He knelt down to give his dogs some extra attention, scratching behind their ears and letting them know how much he appreciated their company. They had always been there for him, no matter what. After everything he had been through in his life, the bond he shared with these dogs was unshakable. He didn't need anything else, just their loyalty and love, which was something that had always grounded him. As Jason began walking along the path with his dogs, he caught sight of the people who had witnessed the earlier scene. Some of them smiled at him, nodding in approval, while others looked more thoughtful, perhaps reflecting on the events of the day. Jason didn't need any kind of recognition, but he appreciated the silent support. It was comforting to know that, in some small way, he had made a difference in the way people viewed their interactions with animals. While walking, Jason began thinking about the biker again. He wondered what would happen to him in the future. Would he carry the lesson Jason had taught him? It wasn't his job to ensure that the man changed, but Jason believed that small moments like this one could lead to big shifts. Sometimes it took just one person to show someone the right path, and that was what he had done today. Jason had stood up for his dogs, yes, but he had also shown the biker what it meant to act with kindness, to be accountable for one's actions. Jason didn't expect the biker to turn into an animal advocate overnight, but he hoped that he would remember the lesson. He hoped that, when faced with a similar situation in the future, the biker would think twice before acting out of selfishness or cruelty. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about doing the right thing when it mattered. As the evening sky grew darker, Jason felt a sense of calm wash over him. His dogs had been through so much with him, always there when he needed them. Today's events were a reminder that in this world of chaos, there was still room for moments of goodness. Jason believed in the power of change, both in people and in the world around him. For now, though, all he wanted was to enjoy this peaceful moment with his dogs. They made the world feel less overwhelming. He continued walking through the park, the gentle rhythm of his steps matching the peaceful atmosphere around him. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. He had protected his dogs, made a difference in someone's life, and in doing so, had created a moment of hope. In the end, That was all anyone could ask for. As Jason walked through the park with his dogs, the evening continued to settle around them like a comforting blanket. The air was cooler now, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves above. But the peace Jason felt was undeniable. His dogs trotted beside him, their tails wagging in rhythm with the pace he set. It was moments like this, simple, calm moments, that reminded him of what truly mattered. He thought about the biker again. Even though the situation had ended on a positive note, it left him with a question that lingered in his mind. Could one encounter really make a lasting difference? Jason had always believed in second chances, but it was one thing to give someone another opportunity and another to expect them to change for the better. He hoped that, deep down, the biker had truly understood the weight of his actions. Still, Jason knew that some lessons took time to sink in, and sometimes it took several small reminders for change to happen. But even if the biker didn't fully grasp the lesson today, Jason knew he had done his part. He had stepped in when it mattered, and he had shown that kindness and respect were always worth standing up for. That was all he could do, take action when needed and trust that it might plant a seed in others. As Jason approached a bench by the park's edge, he decided to sit for a moment. The dogs were happy to rest at his feet, their eyes filled with trust as they settled down. Jason had always found comfort in quiet moments like this, moments when everything seemed to slow down, allowing him to take a breath and reflect. He looked out over the park, watching the shadows stretch longer as the sun continued to dip lower in the sky. It had been a long day, filled with unexpected events, but as he sat there in the fading light, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. He was thankful for his dogs, who had been there with him through it all. They were more than just companions. They were his support, his comfort, and his constant reminder of the importance of loyalty and love. They didn't ask for much. They only wanted his presence, his care, and his attention. In return, they gave him unconditional love and trust, things that no one could ever take away. Jason reflected on his own journey. Life had never been easy for him, but through all the ups and downs, he had learned valuable lessons. He had learned that strength wasn't just about physical power. It was about emotional resilience, about having the courage to stand up for what was right, and about knowing when to walk away from situations that didn't serve you. His experience in movies had taught him how to take on tough roles and handle high-pressure situations, but it was the quiet, simple moments with his dogs that helped him feel grounded. He smiled to himself as he looked at them. They were loyal to him no matter what, and that loyalty was something he would never take for granted. Jason didn't have to do anything grand to earn their love. They gave it freely. In many ways, they had taught him more about life than he could ever learn from a script or a fight scene. They taught him the value of living in the moment and of showing love without expectation. The peaceful atmosphere of the park, combined with the sound of his dog's breathing and the gentle rustling of the leaves, helped him relax further. As the evening turned into night, Jason felt a calmness inside him. The events of the day had left an impression on him, but in the end, he knew that all that mattered was that he had acted with integrity. Whether the biker changed or not, he had done his part in making the world a little kinder. Jason stood up, giving his dogs one last pet before they began walking again. As they strolled through the park, Jason felt a sense of satisfaction. Life might be unpredictable, but moments like this made it all worthwhile. No matter what the future held, he knew that with his dogs by his side, he could face anything that came his way. The night had fully settled in by the time Jason and his dogs finished their walk. The park was quieter now, and the last few visitors had begun to leave. The stars above twinkled softly in the clear sky, offering a serene backdrop to the peaceful moment Jason was experiencing. He could feel the coolness of the evening air against his skin, but it didn't bother him. In fact, it was soothing, and he took a deep breath, letting it fill his lungs. The world felt calmer now, and for once, it seemed that everything was exactly where it needed to be. As he neared the entrance of the park, Jason felt his dogs nudge against his legs, their eager faces looking up at him, as if they were ready to go home. He smiled softly, reaching down to give them each a pat. They had been so brave during the whole ordeal earlier with the biker, and now they were the picture of contentment. Jason was proud of them. They had stuck by him through everything, and their unwavering loyalty was a constant reminder of what mattered most in life: trust, love, and the simple joy of being together. Jason's thoughts drifted again to the biker. He hadn't expected to see him return earlier, but he was glad he had. Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of relief when the man apologized sincerely. The biker hadn't just backed down or given a half-hearted apology. He had come back because he understood, and that made all the difference. It was easy to say sorry when it was the right thing to do, but it was far harder to show genuine change. In that moment, Jason realized that life wasn't about grand gestures or loud displays of power. It was about the small, everyday acts of kindness. It was about showing compassion when it was needed most, standing up for others, and being able to acknowledge when you had made a mistake. Jason had made his choice to stand up for his dogs, not because he needed anyone's approval, but because it was the right thing to do. And maybe, just maybe, that small act would stick with the biker long after they parted ways. As Jason reached the car, he opened the door, letting his dogs climb in first. They were always so eager to jump in, ready to go home and rest after their adventures. Jason closed the door and climbed into the driver's seat, starting the engine and pulling out of the parking lot. The roads were calm now, the city lights glowing faintly in the distance. There was a sense of peace on the road, and Jason felt like he was leaving the park with something more than just a quiet evening. He had learned something today, too. He reflected on how the day had unfolded. It had started off like any other, with a simple walk in the park, but the unexpected encounter with the biker had made him realize how important it was to step in when you saw someone doing something wrong. It didn't matter if they were a stranger or someone you didn't know well. If you could make a difference, you should. Jason wasn't a superhero, and he wasn't looking for recognition. But today, he had made an impact. He had shown someone that their actions had consequences, and maybe, just maybe, that would lead to a better tomorrow for that person. As the car hummed along the quiet streets, Jason's dogs settled down in the back seat, their tired eyes slowly closing as they drifted into a peaceful sleep. Jason couldn't help but smile. They had earned their rest after everything that had happened. He would be sure to take extra care of them, just as they had done for him. Jason thought about the future, about how small acts of kindness could have ripples that stretched farther than we could see. He didn't know what would happen to the biker, or if the man would truly change, but he knew that he had made a difference. And sometimes, that was enough. He didn't need to know the end result. He just needed to know that he had done his part, that he had acted with integrity and compassion when the world needed it most. With a final glance at his sleeping dogs, Jason turned his attention back to the road ahead. He knew that whatever came next, he would face it with the same calm and determination. His dogs would always be by his side, and that made all the difference. Together, they were ready for whatever the future might bring.